In our group, we have a nursery bed. We pot seedlings. And when they are ready, we give them out to the community. We encourage the community to plant trees because we have been suffering with disaster in the past years. So now we encourage people, or the community, to keep the environment green. Indigenous trees are there, yes, but we are telling people that we can plant trees. Because as I grew up, I have never seen my grandfather planting musizi. But this is the generation where I can just go to the nursery and get musizi and I plant. Whereby with my grandfather's generation, we used to wait for them to germinate by themselves. Nobody took care of trees. But this is the generation where we encourage people to take care. I've never seen a woman with a machine. You always find men with what? The machine, cutting timber to take for money. Maybe men should come down and begin protecting trees. We encourage our fellow women to plant trees. Because in those past years, men used to have much power on the indigenous trees, saying that that is my family, that's my inheritance. You can't talk about that one. So when a woman plants some, then she will have that power to talk about that tree.
Eu nasci dentro da mata, cresci dentro da mata e meu pai ensinou como se dá quando a natureza ela... A natureza para nós é a vida do índio. Ela dá oxigênio puro, ela dá alimentação natural para nós, caça e pesca, fruta nativa da mata, remédio. É vida nossa, é pulmão, é coração e pulmão por isso que eu decidi defender. Aqui no nosso meio da terra do Uruguai, foi os dois, invasor, desmatamento e as queimadas, né? Esse é um problema que está vindo se avançando muito rápido e os desmatamentos mesmo, principalmente, estão cada vez se avançando mais rápido. Continua prejudicando nós, porque cada vez que eles vêm desmatando, vai chegando perto da aldeia, né? Eu cada vez estou sendo mais ameaçado e não só o Uruguai se sente ameaçado, todos os parentes do Brasil estão sendo ameaçados. Eu acho que devido ao governo, né? Porque ele, quando na campanha, quando eles querem ganhar um voto, fica fazendo promessa, incentiva os pessoal que está em volta ali com o olho grande, já incentiva eles a entrar no território da gente. Porque a gente também é ser humano, a gente só quer o direito que é nosso e quer que o governo faça alguma coisa para tentar impedir essa invasão, esse massacre de índio, desmatamento dentro do território nosso. Então é isso que a gente precisa. O WWF, ela apoia muito nós nessa parte de... Eles apoiam o jeito de costume, né? De proteger nosso território. A nova agora para nós, para mim principalmente, que vai ajudar na parte muito agora, vai ser o drone, né? Que é uma ferramenta nova que está vindo aí, que nós mesmo indígenas, nós nunca imaginava que ia chegar a esse ponto que Nessa parte aí a WWF vai ajudar muito e como ensinar a fotografar, bater foto e mapear com drone. E hoje nós veio fazer uma vigilância e nós veio e soltou o drone para subir. Aí acabamos de descobrir que tem a área desmatada do outro lado do rio Jamari aqui, que é uma área desmatada muito grande. E a pastagem desmatada aqui, ó, olha o tamanho dela, ela é muito grande. Não tem fim, não dá para chegar perto. Essa parte aí que a WWF, o drone vai continuar ajudando nós nessa vigilância, não é só na vigilância, também principalmente na queimada, né? Essa parceria aqui, eu espero que não acabe por aqui, que continue. Eu quero ver a floresta em pé. Eu quero ver a floresta em pé, isso que é a minha esperança. Todo mundo junto, se unido, vai, né?
Tongass is so big it almost defies description. Thousands of miles of coastline, hundreds of islands, and trees. 11 million acres worth of Sitka spruce, western hemlock, and Alaska cedar. All this and the wildlife that lives there belongs to you and me. It's up to the Forest Service to manage it in a way that will allow as many different uses as possible for the forest. What do you think of the way the Forest Service has handled the situation out here?
I think they have a lot of gall selling the people's land to this one company, letting them get rich, while generations of people are going to have to look at the scar that's left. It's not just logging coming into this area that I don't like. It's the logging practice in general in all the Southeast, or the whole use of our national resources.
That was my neighbor Howard. Like most of us out here, he's a commercial fisherman. He moved to this village about 50 years ago, the same time as my parents. Howard and my folks learned how to catch salmon from the old-timers. But just as they got comfortable living off the land, they realized a cruel truth. This idyllic fishing village is front lines of a David and Goliath battle against short-sighted greed and the ruin of one of the last coastal rainforests in the world. This film is about what it means to call a place home. But it's also about how the fight to keep trees standing in Alaska is critical to the future of our planet. My name is Elsa, and I'm from an island in Alaska. My parents raised me on this fishing boat, and honestly, it wasn't always a great time. Seasickness, cramped quarters, clothes that smelled like salmon guts. You get the picture. But I became a fisherman anyway. Fishing made me fundamentally part of an ecosystem, entirely dependent on wild salmon, and in turn, everything that those fish depend on. This lifestyle is about trying not to take more than you need. Growing up, my family didn't have much money. or electricity or running water. But these things don't matter much in Point Baker. I know a lot of people wouldn't want to live here, but for us, it's a fisherman's paradise. There's food everywhere if you know how to catch it. Wool shirts have never gone out of style, and no one tells anyone else what to do. There's no church in Point Baker, but there is the forest. This is a really beautiful example of an old-growth forest. Generations of trees growing, falling, growing to reach this point where you have a healthy, productive, old-growth forest. When a big old tree falls in the forest like this one that I'm sitting on, one of the primary things that it offers is a nursery for the next generation of trees. Here's a little spruce sprout. So these trees are getting a leg up, and they're benefiting from this grandmother tree that came generations before them. The trees that I'm standing under are part of the rainforest bioregion that spans from Northern California to Alaska. But the logging boom of the first half of the century decimated most of the southern forest. Today, at 17 million acres, the Tongass is the largest intact temperate rainforest in the world. Back in the 70s and 80s, my parents and neighbors were part of a grassroots movement that won protection for 9 million acres of the Tongass.
Today, we preserve the final frontiers of America's national forests for our children. This will include protection for the last great temperate rainforest in America, Alaska's Tongass National Forest.
But that initial sense of hope was short-lived. The logging industry continued to find ways to weasel around the protections. Today, the Tongass is the only national forest in the United States where it is legal to clear-cut swaths of old growth. The industry lobbies relentlessly to roll back protections so they can gain access to every last giant tree. And now, 2 decades later, they might have their chance.
President Trump has instructed Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue to exempt Alaska's 17 million acre Tongass National Forest from logging restrictions imposed nearly 20 years ago. The move would affect more than half of the world's largest intact temperate rainforest.
I watched this news on my phone, and I cried. I felt hopeless. Like the decades of work, protests, and public hearings of my parents' generation meant nothing. For Trump, this is nothing more than a business transaction, a favor to someone in exchange for something else. For those of us who depend on this land, this news is devastating. I didn't know what to do. And at the same time, it felt like my turn to take a stand for the forest. Salmon season had come and gone, and I had a lot of time on my hands. I had an old derelict sailboat, and I poured myself into it to stay busy. As the Merlet started to look more seaworthy, I got an idea. Not many people have seen the remote and threatened places of the Tongass. What if this old boat and I could show them? With the idea lodged in my head, I coerced 2 of my friends to join me.
Great day, huh?
Mara is a botanical illustrator, just back from months of living on top of 2 vertical miles of ice at the summit station in Greenland. She will help us see the forest from an artist's perspective. And Natalie is a badass field biologist who has spent decades working alone, on some of the most remote islands in this rainforest. A few years ago, the three of us shared a rain-soaked 150-mile bushwhack through the backcountry of the Tongass. And Natalie and Mara are both tough enough or crazy enough that they turned up for another round. Our main intention with this voyage is ground truthing.
Ground truthing is this really incredible way to just understand a landscape by being in it. And so you notice things that you wouldn't otherwise notice. And you can also talk about what it actually means to be in a clear cut versus an old growth forest, because you've walked through those two different places.
The hope is to circumnavigate the island, which is about 350 nautical miles. We're going to visit places on Prince of Wales Island that aren't often seen by people, and try to document those areas because they are threatened. I've run my own fishing boats up and down the west coast of Prince of Wales, but I've never gone around Cape Shacken down on the south end. It's pretty wide open water down there, and we're gonna have to really be lucky with the weather forecast to be able to make it around safely. Really good winds. We really get into a groove with the boat.
It's so wonderful having the chance to explore with both Mara and Elsa, because their life experience is incredibly rich, but they also get to see this forest in ways that are different than the way I see it, and that's really valuable. When you step foot out of your Zodiac onto the ground, you don't know what to expect. Yoo-hoo! There's just so much life. And as a biologist, that's incredible. The Tongass National Forest is a coastal temperate rainforest, and coastal temperate rainforests have more biomass, more vegetation, more life than any other kind of forest on the planet. The wetlands, the rivers, the creeks form the arteries and veins that crisscross all of the forest. And the salmon push up these rivers and streams, and they bring with them all of the nutrients that they've gathered from their time in the ocean. They move up these rivers and streams, they spawn. As they die after spawning, those nutrients feed forests and grow the largest trees on the Tongass National Forest. Salmon feed the densest populations of black bears in the world. The Alexander Archipelago wolf, found only in this region, is known as the salmon-eating wolf. Everything is connected here in this archipelago. Salmon, eagles, sea lions, bears, wolves, and the trees.
Saturday. Sumner Strait, today, southwest with 15 knots. Seas 4 feet. Showers. Sunday night, southeast wind 30 knots. Gusts to 45 knots. Seas 6 feet. Rain. Monday, southeast gale to 40 knots, becoming south 25 knots.
knew that somewhere over here there was going to be logging when one of my friends told me about it. And like, this is it. That hillside that we were looking at is completely bare. Just makes me sad that we didn't get to see that forest. It's depressing to see it still happening.
I'm sad that not more Americans see this, know what's going on, and are angry about it.
Not everyone's ever going to see this place, and that's fine. People don't have to see and immerse themselves in places to care about them. We all care about a lot of things that we've never seen or been a part of.
So many of our public lands have been laid to waste. That's part of our legacy. But there are still forests on Prince of Wales Island and in the Tongass that are wild and intact and full of life. The fact that there's people who have fought for those places, who have seen their value, that's part of our legacy as well. With the wind at our back, we set a course for home. We are about to return to Point Baker and close the circle on this voyage. For so many climate solutions, we have to do things. We have to change the way we live. In this case, all we have to do is stop and let these ancient forests do what they've done for this planet for thousands of years. And there's still so much to save. I could have never done this journey alone. It doesn't matter that Natalie grew up in Detroit and Mara comes from the prairies of Montana. We are all guests here, and yet the fate of the Tongass is something we hold in common. Before we embarked on this journey, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to take a stand for this forest in the way that my parents had, but I wanted to find my own connection. I wanted a story that I could tell the Forest Service, my friends, my grandkids. I wanted a story that I could tell myself when it started to feel like it might be easier to ignore that this was happening. Each of us has the power to move the dial, to change the conversation, even just a little, if we care deeply enough about something and pour our whole self into it.
stay in dreams and pray for everyone when we're alone.
Half of the world's rainforests have disappeared in the past 60 years. Indigenous communities' homes, endangered species habitats, the lungs of the planet. At Gen Z for the Trees, our mission is to achieve global net zero deforestation by 2030 by building a digital community of youth who work together to tackle the various causes of deforestation. We do this by educating the youth, inspiring them to not lose hope, and creating change by researching and influencing corporations and governments. Since our launch last summer, our palm oil research studied key companies, mapped 5,000 palm oil mills, and uncovered 310 mills lacking Universal Mill List ID number. We are power mapping supply chains and turning ourselves into young experts on the industry. Our other commodity teams are investigating soya, beef cattle, and timber pulp and paper as drivers of deforestation. We also have teams for finance, law and policy, media and outreach, and GIS. From New York Climate Week to the UN Youth Environment Assembly to the RSPO, we are here, energetic, and making waves. So join us in our journey to make the world a better place. Because we are Generation Z, and deforestation ends with us.
Welcome to the fight for our forests. Navigate the top 10 myths about the destruction of our forests to collect bonus points along the way. Are you strong enough to complete the challenge? Good luck! Myth 1. Most trees are cut down for paper and wood, right? Wrong. The truth is, the biggest cause of deforestation is the production of food, with meat, soy, and palm oil some of the biggest causes of forest loss. Myth 2. This is inevitable. There are too many people to feed. We need more space. Wrong again. The most tragic thing about the deforestation being caused by our food is that this destruction is totally pointless. There is enough already cleared land available for food production to feed a growing global population, so we don't need to cut down any more forests. Bonus! Myth 3. Beef is the only food that causes deforestation. Forests are certainly being cut down for grazing cattle, but nearly half of global deforestation is actually caused by crops, with soy being the #1 culprit. More than 80% of this soy is used to feed animals, particularly chickens and pigs. So without us realizing it, meat production is causing huge swathes of deforestation across the world. Myth 4. I only buy British meat, so that's okay, right? Wrong again. Buying locally sourced meat is a good thing to do. It supports our farmers and cuts down on air miles. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. Chickens and pigs here in the UK need to eat, and this often involves the humble soybean. Grown largely in South America, it's one of the largest causes of deforestation on the planet, and it's being fed to our chickens and pigs here in the UK. But soy can and should be grown sustainably. Myth 5. We can only solve this if we all go vegan. Eating a more plant-based diet is certainly better for your health and the planet. But deforestation could be hiding in many food products in our supermarkets, not just meat. From products containing palm oil, like biscuits and bread, to chocolate bars. So going vegan isn't the solution by itself. Ultimately, we don't think any of our food should be destroying the planet. Myth 6. Boycotting palm oil will help stop deforestation. Wrong. Found in nearly half of packaged products we find in the supermarkets, from pizza to deodorant, palm oil has caused huge amounts of deforestation, with endangered species like the orangutan suffering as a result. But the real problem is not the crop itself, but rather how and where it's grown. Palm oil is in many ways a supercrop, efficient and productive. To get the same amount of vegetable oil from a similar crop could require anything between 4 and 10 times more land. Boycotting palm oil could therefore cause more deforestation, not less. The solution is for companies to use only sustainable palm oil that respects and safeguards people and nature. Bonus! Myth 7. This problem will be solved by avoiding certain foods or brands. If only it were that simple. There are hundreds of different names for palm oil, while the soy used to feed our livestock isn't even listed as an ingredient. The scary truth is, at present, there's simply no way of knowing where deforestation is hiding. This isn't something individuals can solve alone by avoiding certain foods. That's why we need the UK government to end deforestation on our supermarket shelves. Myth 8. This is a problem for the food companies to sort out. Efforts by business alone have not been enough to stop deforestation. While some have made progress, things are not moving fast enough, and time is running out. This is why government has to step in. New laws would level the playing field, so those businesses doing the right thing aren't at a disadvantage. Both businesses and government have a massive role to play in creating better standards and reducing the causes of deforestation. Myth 9. The UK government can't do anything. It's foreign governments that need to act. This is a global problem. All governments need to act. A world without the Amazon or tropical rainforest affects all of us. By ending deforestation in our products here in the UK, we can lead the world in the fight to save our forests. Bonus! Myth 10. There's nothing I can do about it. Wrong! It's not game over yet. There is something you can do about it. You can raise awareness by sharing this film. You can eat a more plant-based diet. And most importantly, you can call on our decision makers to end deforestation in our food. We all need to fight for our forests and get deforestation off our plates.
Los bosques de Colombia son milagros de la creación. Son el hogar de especies que no se encuentran en ningún otro lugar del planeta. Regulan nuestro clima y nos proporcionan alimentos, agua, medicinas y medios de vida. Trágicamente, están siendo destruidos ante nuestros ojos, para la ganadería extensiva, para la agroindustria, para la minería ilegal y para los cultivos de uso ilícito. Esto crea grandes problemas para nuestro pueblo, acelera el cambio climático e impulsa la extinción de especies, conduce a la inseguridad alimentaria, resulta en enfermedades como los coronavirus y amenaza a los pueblos indígenas que han preservado los bosques durante generaciones. Sin bosques no hay futuro. Por eso lanzamos la iniciativa interreligiosa para los bosques tropicales de Colombia, para traer el poder y la influencia de los líderes religiosos a la protección de los bosques. Líderes religiosos, pueblos indígenas, las ONG, las Naciones Unidas, los científicos, autoridades gubernamentales. Somos una coalición que trabaja en todos los sectores para poner fin a la deforestación. ¿Cómo trabajamos? 1. Educamos y concientizamos a través de capacitaciones y campañas. Compartimos los últimos datos sobre los bosques, el cambio climático y los derechos humanos. De esta manera, equipamos a los líderes religiosos para que entren en acción, para incorporar el cuidado de los bosques en sus enseñanzas religiosas, para hablar públicamente sobre la deforestación y para reunir en sus lugares de culto para actuar. 2. Movilizamos la acción sobre el terreno. Donde los bosques se enfrentan a las mayores amenazas, lanzamos capítulos locales. Cada uno de ellos es una coalición de líderes religiosos que trabajan hombro a hombro con los pueblos indígenas locales, los científicos y las ONG en planes de acción para proteger los bosques de esa región. Estamos activos desde San Vicente del Caguán, Cartagena del Chairá, San José del Guaviare, La Macarena, Puerto Guzmán, Puerto Asís, Calamar, El Retorno, Miraflores, Solano, Puerto Rico y más allá. Hemos entrenado y movilizado a miles de líderes religiosos y el movimiento está creciendo. 3. Abogamos por el cambio y la aplicación de políticas, porque detener la deforestación se reduce a la voluntad política. Nos reunimos con alcaldes, concejales, gobernadores, miembros del Congreso y ministros para exigir acción. Llevamos a cabo debates públicos, aseguramos compromisos y monitoreamos el progreso en la protección de nuestros bosques. Nuestro mensaje es simple: adoptar, cumplir y ampliar los compromisos de protección de los bosques de Colombia y sus guardianes. Somos testigos para acompañar la formulación de políticas locales y nacionales para asegurar la justicia para los bosques y los pueblos indígenas. 4. Influimos en el sector privado. Nuestro objetivo es eliminar la deforestación de la producción de alimentos, en particular de la carne de vacuno y de cultivos agroindustriales. También abogamos por la desinversión en empresas que tienen como objetivo obtener beneficios de la deforestación, como la minería, la exploración de petróleo y gas y la tala comercial. Como comunidades religiosas, nuestras carteras de inversión son grandes. Invertimos con conciencia y dejamos que las empresas sepan dónde estamos. Hacemos que las empresas rindan cuentas de sus políticas y prácticas. Muchos credos, un solo propósito. Abogamos por los bosques, abogamos por la justicia climática, abogamos por los pueblos indígenas. Los bosques son nuestro futuro y el momento de actuar es ahora. La Iniciativa Interreligiosa para los Bosques Tropicales de Colombia. Únase a nosotros.
Bueno, namo muna tia pedawan na. Ese animal nosotros protegemos acá porque no hay mucho y entonces nosotros tenemos que darle seguimiento. Y no es un animal que no es tan malo y él es mansito. Mawa ne ara etano namana ang animal na abape unu na pede nang droit de bintan.
águila arpía hace 2 años que la vi danzando en otras comunidades. Y vemos y vamos danzando, le enseñamos a las niñas más chiquitas también, la vamos enseñando para que a la medida que ellos van creciendo, vayan así mismo. No la danzamos porque sabemos que esa danza la tenemos. Toda la comunidad se beneficia a través del águila arpía, con los turistas. Demostramos nuestra cultura, nuestras artesanías y con eso nos beneficiamos el pueblo entero.
¿Qué están sacando, pues? Cuesta reírme.
Ibana idiara panunda aguilar pia. Hana dai bedia deva harawata ta guluchu. Animana nehumbu kajiro asida warako ajid ina hana para khate ajid arana maba ajid nana tumu ne khate ajid. Mana valor mana importancia para aquilo mana ado pana ida também para nama kedera ma ado pana ida tai. Medio ambiente que en verdad de equilibrio, verdad, que viabuta no que para vos cuando quieran cana verdad. Mea hoy no me anta bakurwa ibu abea ta kuira panu da verdad y ana mea bea ta kuira panu da verdad. Angke ne humbu rahana. Yo akdi rahana mare tera bada kina kana. Imbana zeza. Ya nu be mai bari de ya ne bai bakuru hoy toda que bear uma se kaku. Uma se kaku. Vai tu rakane batoni sama todi vai tu agua troanya no me anta carretera beada manquira daene va uma perde mansida in amera verdad ella no me ha toda que bea imbana que dea animana me akoa que dea manuma. Manggura mana biwa kipeda mangkana tene mangkana luchei de buta imande ruta ananda itari fanunda lo tande hando bueno anja bang para mana no
¿ya? Ang Aguilar Piara antes, vuestra dañaba cuira fananita, biara.
Que la baje el que sí quiere conservarla. Ah, perdieron. ¿Qué tiene en la cabeza el águila arpía? A ver, ¿quién me dice? ¿Ah? Díganme. Cacho. ¿Es vaca? No, tiene plumas. Plumas.
Tenemos aproximadamente 2 años trabajando en esta comunidad en un proyecto que ellos desearon implementar. Un proyecto de conservación y educación con el águila arpía, también con la parte de turismo y las tortugas marinas. Como comunidad organizada deseaban implementar algo que los beneficiara económicamente y también que beneficiara al medio ambiente. Yo empecé a trabajar acá en Darién cuando era bastante joven. Simplemente me enamoré de Darién, me enamoré del proyecto con el águila arpía. A tal punto de que no hice una vida propia. También del águila. Y a las personas que me dicen si tengo compromiso, les digo no, no tengo un compromiso. Mi compromiso es con el águila arpía y con la gente acá.
Sí, por favor.
Espérame. La cría actualmente tiene 3 meses y medio a 4 meses. Se está monitoreando todos los meses. Anota los nombres en la parte de arriba. Exacto. Yo creo que el proyecto sí ha sido exitoso porque las comunidades nos han aceptado. Baja la última que verificaste. Y ellos comprenden esa importancia, comprenden que las mismas necesidades que tiene un águila arpía en el bosque son las mismas necesidades que ellos tienen como personas. La cola se ve todavía con sangre en los cañones. Y eso se hace aproximadamente. Voy a pasar la cinta por aquí. Yo te lo voy a tirar allá y tú lo vas a subir a este lado. Ándate de aquí.
Chiruara pe ane pang no. Mahama man humma nama se uru ya ni mana. Yaman ni hamar humma pe aida te ya. Mawa no ya. Cuidada peda y pedi kinchara se no porque dawatari va para tara se bu. Que y mama wa hari di o hari bu khanina. Ya handak cha nama ya nama ma mandab.
La principal amenaza que enfrenta el águila arpía en Darién es la devastación del bosque. Debido a la deforestación y a la devastación de los hábitats y a la cacería ilegal, la población de águilas arpías se ha reducido o se ha eliminado en muchos lugares. Porque si no actuamos para evitar el deterioro del ambiente, la especie puede desaparecer. Ahorita no, ¿qué está haciendo la cría?
Ahí sentada.
Eso nos preocupa un poco porque la cría estaba piando, la cría estaba llamando por comida. Tiene una cría cada 2 años y medio o 3 años. Eso la ubica en una posición de riesgo bastante alta. Sin embargo, más de la mitad de las crías que nacen no llegan a ser, no llegan a independizarse.
ombligo le ponemos a los bebés recién nacidos, en el ombligo, como la del águila arpía, el del tigre, de la nutria. Les ponemos eso porque son animales que tienen fuerza. Y también del águila arpía para tener fuerza y para tener visiones más largas. Cuando vemos eso, hacemos así mismo en la danza que hacemos del águila arpía. Estamos haciendo algo de las aves en nosotros personas.
Ahora mismo está ahí.
El águila macho llegó al nido y trajo una presa. Podrías mirar a ver qué puede ser lo que tiene en las patas del águila. ¿Qué parece? Tiene pelo. Parece que es un mamífero, ¿no? Tiene pelo. Y tiene la cola, puede ser un primate. Un mono, ¿verdad? Sí. Un mono gototumo.
Y él se siente muy bien porque ahora mismo está comiendo mono aviador y lo trajo el padre.
Para mí es emocionante. El águila arpía es una de las aves rapaces más fuertes del mundo. Ver cómo ese animal lleva comida, toma pequeños pedacitos y alimenta a la cría, eso es impresionante.
Bueno, animara pia mere jira. Y me hay jira. Neka jira aita. Muna bio sobra busida bua porque mangga dewa mani muni jabane kobuena. Bio biasa senti barap.
every single person on our planet is connected. Every day, food grown by farmers in another corner of the world is shipped thousands of miles to reach our plate. Pollution generated by one country flows freely into another. And in an increasingly globalized world, we know how quickly a virus can travel between people and continents. As a global community, time is running out to tackle the climate crisis, and both our individual and collective actions matter. Trees are the lungs of the earth, and their ability to absorb vast amounts of carbon from the atmosphere make them one of the most effective tools against climate change. Yet, every year, our increasing demands on the planet lead to an area of tropical forest 9 times the size of Wales being destroyed. Size of Wales is a charity that secures tropical forests by connecting communities around the world and inspiring them to take climate action together. Modern Wales is built on the values of community, solidarity, and global responsibility. But that isn't the whole story. We have also done our fair share to contribute to the climate crisis and injustice through our industrial past. Embracing the best bits of our national characteristics, we work in partnership with the communities hit first and hardest by the climate crisis to protect forests and plant millions of trees each year. We also work with hundreds of schools and thousands of young people, running educational workshops and giving the next generation a platform to realize the power of their voices. Paving the way to a healthier and more sustainable nation, we are calling for Wales to become the world's first deforestation-free nation. This means eliminating tropical deforestation from our economy caused by everyday commodities like palm oil and soy. To be globally responsible, we cannot cut our emissions at home simply to carry on importing them from elsewhere. Every single person on our planet is connected to one another, and small actions by many people can make a difference. But it's only when we work together in one clear voice, across boundaries, cultures, and languages, that we will create the change needed for our planet's survival. That is our mission.
So a monarch butterfly is a big, beautiful orange and black butterfly that can be seen in a lot of places throughout North America. And when I get to go out and watch butterflies, it's just so wonderful to see how beautiful life is. Butterflies are really interesting, and they're in trouble. Most species of insects, including monarch butterflies, are rapidly declining and vanishing. And so how do we save these beautiful species that we all know is part of the biodiversity that makes the earth function? There are so many things that are fascinating about monarch butterflies. One is that they're long-distance migrants. They go from North America, north of the US border, which is where we are now, into Canada, and they come south and they go all the way to a mountainous region in central Mexico. All along the way, they need food, they need rest areas. Without them, they face habitat loss and death. So the Niagara River corridor is located in the Great Lakes at the eastern end of Lake Erie, and it is just where all the water flows and where a lot of life flows and relies on. What's really changed a lot in the last 100, 200 years, though, is that humans have had an impact as they've urbanized, as they've industrialized, as they've hardened the shorelines. Well, this whole area is called Times Beach Nature Preserve, and we're located in downtown Buffalo, right on the edge of Lake Erie and the Niagara River. It's a beautiful little green jewel amongst an urban wilderness. Well, for a long time, this site was used as a contained disposal facility for the Corps of Engineers when they were dredging the Buffalo River and the Buffalo Harbor, and it filled up with toxic sediments. When they discovered it was toxic, they closed it. And so in the 70s, a bunch of people, including myself, came along and said, well, There's a lot of birds that are visiting here, there's a lot of insects that are here, there's a lot of butterflies that are here. Why don't we try to reclaim it and make it a nature area? The monarchs, which have been coming here more frequently because of the rest stop that we've provided, have sometimes come here in numbers of thousands. So the Pollinator Conservation Association has a mission to conserve pollinators. We create resilient shorelines, we create living shorelines, we create habitat. It helps protect human life as well as the life of the flora and fauna that we depend on. We work collaboratively with a lot of institutions, whether they're government agencies, not-for-profit organizations, or educations of higher learning. The University of Buffalo works to help inform us with research about things like tagging butterflies, looking at the size of the monarch caterpillars, counting the number of eggs, seeing where they're laying eggs, and basically measuring their general condition.
Oh wait, yeah, look at. That's an egg. Ooh. Oh yeah, there is some more. Really? Three eggs right there.
Research is so important. Without research, we really don't know what to do or what we've done. People can do a lot of things to help. Starts with being aware, going outdoors, experiencing nature, doing what they can to protect nature. Use more native plants. Native plants are so fundamental to the success of the life of so many pollinators. Since the beginning of time, it can be argued that the culture of humanity has been to defeat nature. We're at a point now where we've just about done it. In order for us to survive as humans, we've got to learn to live with nature, work with nature, and help nature to support us. We have to find ways to work together to make sure that we have a future.
The coastal wolves of British Columbia are one of the most endearing animals in North America. As part of a small group of filmmakers, we seized upon a unique opportunity to observe one particular pack of these beautiful animals on the west coast of Vancouver Island. A 2-week, rain-soaked and wind-swept expedition eventually rewarded us with some calm seas, west coast sun, and incredible encounters with these resilient, playful wolves. This adventure began with a large amount of camera equipment being squeezed in the back of a very small plane. A scenic flight and an unusual landing on a secluded beach delivered us to this remote and wild location. Our small group of fellow videographers established a modest base camp on the edge of the sand, barely shielded from the strong Pacific winds that have shaped the west coast of Canada for over a millennia. Small tent-like photography blinds are used to shield us from the weather and the immediate attention of wildlife. Our cameras are prepped and positioned, ready for the group to begin documenting the elusive coastal wolf.
They're incredibly shy. They're incredibly charismatic and gentle. It's kind of a very emotional experience to be this close to these wolves, and you want them to dictate the encounter. So you park yourself in one spot day after day, sitting here from dark to dark. They know we're here, but we're trying to reduce our movement, our noise, our talking. We want them to be able to smell us, to know every time they come around that corner that we're not in some unique new spot, and then you let them relax into you and you don't push them.
Coastal wolves are found in the remote temperate rainforests of British Columbia. They are highly intelligent and social animals, adapting to their geographical location, living between the forest and the sea, with a distinct set of evolutionary behaviors unique only to them. One of the reasons the coastal wolves, and subsequently us, were drawn to this specific location was due to the abundance of food that was provided from the carcass of a dead sperm whale. Washed up on shore sometime before our arrival, this once magnificent mammal has now become an incredibly important source of nutrition for the local wildlife, including the pack of wolves that we're documenting. However, the whale's remains aren't the only source of food in the area. Coastal wolves are beachcombers, with seafood making the vast majority of their diet, differentiating them from inland wolves. They forage through the kelp and the seaweed, consuming barnacles, mussels, limpets, chitons, dead marine mammals, and salmon, anything they can scavenge. It's a tough existence in a hostile, albeit beautiful environment. Coastal wolves aren't the only animals to roam these shores. Black bears have been exploring all over Vancouver Island for the past 10,000 years, and this area is no exception. Wandering down by a beach at low tide, this black bear was on the look for an easy meal, unfazed by the presence of a film crew captivated by its presence. The black bear's biggest predator, of course, is us. This striking animal, along with coastal wolves, are both under threat from trophy hunters. Even though coastal wolves are genetically different to the grey wolf, under British Columbia's provincial wolf management plan, it is still legally allowed for sport hunters to kill coastal wolves. It's shameful to think the animals you see here could already be someone's trophy. As filmmakers, the message we hope to share is one of admiration for an animal deserving of more positive support and attention. Our hope is that these images we share will inspire people to take notice, to learn more about the coastal wolves, their ecosystems, behaviors, and threats. Understanding is the key to their conservation.
When photographing any animal, the first thing that you need to do is understand their behavior. You need to look, watch, and learn to try and predict what they're doing so that you can be ready to take the image when you know what's going to happen. Slowly, we've learned to understand what they're actually doing and also gain their trust, because they know we're here, but as long as we're not interfering, they accept us, and then we can photograph them.
I love the opportunity to show people wolves in rain and stormy conditions, because they're out all year, and they're really such a dynamic animal to pursue. They're just fun to try and track and follow and figure out, and we'll move our camp if we have to try and stay with them and learn from them and that sort of thing.
Throughout every type of weather British Columbia could throw at us, we were frequently visited by these incredible animals, bearing witness to their complex social structure, hunting methods, and a chorus of howling. Quietly sitting shoulder to shoulder for 15 hours a day, we watched as the next generation of coastal wolves developed the skills they will need to survive in the wilds of British Columbia. We observed a breeding pair of alphas along with their 8 young pups. 6 other adults were also present in the same pack. As with most wolf species, the adults work together raising the young. The pups were followed close by the adults, but were starting to gain distance, becoming more independent and learning to forage. When watching these gentle pups, it's easy to see where our beloved domestic dogs have evolved from, with their ancestors having similar qualities and playfulness.
Early in the morning, especially one female, we see her coming out and digging into a huge lump of kelp with all the steam coming off, and then she rolls around in it. It's like she's taking a warm bath, and she seems to be doing this very regularly. It's a wonderful thing to watch.
We're using our photography, our cameras, our storytelling to make that connection with these animals. Are they the big bad wolf? No, they're incredibly beautiful, spiritual, thoughtful, charismatic, caring, gentle animals, and you can only do that through beautiful filmmaking or photography, where you give people an intimate look into the eyes and the soul and the hearts of these animals that they'll otherwise never get. People have to understand how fragile these wolves are, how fragile their ecosystems are. It's like discovering a unique tribe that has never been discovered before. You know, they exist on these islands, and they work harder than any other species trying to scratch out a living, trying to survive.
Spending time in the secluded region of British Columbia's coastline, we bear witness to a stunning natural beauty, an unspoiled Wild West coast inhabited by some of Canada's most iconic species. With each tide and sunset that frames this wild landscape, a unique and breathtaking moment is ready to be captured on camera. As filmmakers, we get our reward not just from witnessing these unique wildlife moments, but in sharing them with others that don't have the same privilege. Our images tell a story of a balanced but threatened ecosystem and gives us the opportunity to reflect on the consequences of our own actions. We need to maintain this balance so future generations of coastal wolves can thrive without fear from human interference, and also so future generations of humans can appreciate them with the respect that they have earned. We must listen to the call of the coastal wolves.
Hermana mía. No puedo creer. Yo nunca le he visto en vivo. Nunca. La otra parece. Mira, levantó su cabeza. Ay, qué hermoso. Wow. Mira, captura. Mira, se me está tirando. Soy natural de acá, he nacido acá como yo les digo, ya tengo mis 40 años, primera vez veo el oso y para mí es algo emocionante para poder contar a mis visitantes cuando vengan y yo me sentí realmente emocionada al ver por primera vez moverse a un oso, moverse, levantar la cabeza, cómo come, ya que nosotros hacemos en peluche. Y pues no, el oso está quietecito, mientras en vivo le ves que camina, que te ve, te escucha, te huele, ¿no? Mira.
Pues si volteamos,
mira su carita. Está por acá.
Parece que estuviera en él. Cierra un ojo y de ahí hacia más arriba, hacia abajo, mira.
Me sentí tan emocionada de mirar el oso así, en vivo y en directo, mirarlo cómo camina, cómo se mueve, ¿no? Que nunca habíamos visto. Y teniendo lo nuestro, que no teníamos ese tiempo a disposición para nosotros hoy día ver esa realidad y tenemos ese voto de contar a los demás, decir que sí existe y sí lo tenemos.
¿Listos? 1, 2, 3. Corocha, unidos por la conservación.
This is the largest freshwater invertebrate on the planet. The giant Tasmanian freshwater lobster is only found in the northeast and the northwest of Tassie. And that's it. It's just that small coastal strip extending along both areas that run into Bass Strait that they're found. So even in Tasmania, they're only found in probably 15% of the state. If you protect lobsters, you're protecting the whole creek and then the riparian zone for 30, 40, 50 metres either side of the creek. The whole thing comes into play. I grew up catching lobsters as a young Tasmanian boy. Went and worked the mainland for 15 years in aquaculture. I've got the background to understand how the ecological system works and just a general feel for the bush. It's madness for people to think, oh no, you want to stop everything. Well, no, you don't. You just want to have a decent bit of bush there, mate. You don't have to be a rabid greenie to say, well, I think I'd like to see this river in good condition in 100 years. At the moment, we're on the brink of making a choice. We can either keep clearing all these headwaters and basically having a heap of river systems in Tassie where lobsters are that are full of sediment, or we can stop and have some river systems that are going to be sediment-free and look like they're supposed to look before European settlement. Nowadays, we've got most of the lowland stuff done, so they're heading into the headwater systems, which is up in the hills a bit. The problem with that is that the sediment gets in the headwaters, it runs downstream, and it doesn't matter what you're doing downstream, if you're stuffing upstream, you're stuffing the whole river system. And that's what's happened. Sediment is by far and away the biggest killer of these animals. I'm not saying that shouldn't be listed as vulnerable, they should, they've been decimated. In a small creek on a hot day with no shade, the water hits 25, lobsters die. The canopy supplies the food, the shelter and the shade. Everything comes from the bush. What I do nowadays is more just the tagging and researching of populations just to see how they're travelling. He'd weigh about 1.7 kilo. He's got scars all over his body from fighting. There's a nice scar there where he's had his antenna taken off. So he's been quite an active boy. For me, it's just walking through the man ferns to get to these beautiful rivers that are in the middle of nowhere with tannin-stained water, clean rocky bottoms, big myrtles, big blackwoods, man ferns all over the place. There's shade. You've got these fantastic animals living in them. They're a great part of the world. Why shouldn't we look after it? We can't lock up the world, but it's got to be balanced. If a headwater goes, that's it. You cannot put the whole thing back and make a river. And I would say 3/4 of the river systems in the north of the state have got sediment issues. And the ones that are left, are slowly dwindling. If we start, trashing those headwaters, there is no comeback from that. It'll just be another ditch. If that's what people want, that's fine. That's up to them. But if we don't make the choice now, we're gone. Those systems are stuffed.
Quite frankly, it's like a lost world. It's like, finding something that shouldn't be there.
Hace 35 años conocí el río San Pedro en una expedición de pesca con mi padre y vi esos árboles que estaban fuera de lugar, que no obedecían a ninguna forma conocida en la región que yo no había visto. Posteriormente me hice biólogo y esa pregunta de esos árboles raros que estaban ahí, esa pregunta la quise contestar. La primera vez le escribí al doctor Ezequiel, me dijo que si era una bonita historia, pero pues como que no me creía mucho.
I have to confess, really, somewhat arrogantly or patronizingly, I said, Manuel, those can't be mangroves. They're too far away from the coast. And he said, they're red mangroves. I said, those cannot be, under any stretch of imagination, red mangroves. Red mangroves are obligate coastal dwellers. And he said, well, you should come and see them. And so we went and see them. And indeed, they are red mangroves. You saw the flowers growing in freshwater rivers. We are in Laguna del Cacahuate, which is a lagoon associated to the San Pedro River, it has the same water, and the runoff from the mountains here is a contributor through the lagoon to the San Pedro River. We are around some 40 meters above sea level, completely removed from the natural distribution or from the assumed natural distribution of the red mangrove.
You see there's an epiphytic fern up there? Or is that not?
Yeah.
What is that?
That's philodendron.
Philodendron.
Believe it or not, it's a monocot.
Well, that's something that you don't see on mangroves anywhere else.
No, although that is a mangrove, yeah.
Right, so it's on the mangrove. It's like sort of the joining of the two ecosystems.
It is, because that's a tropical rainforest plant. It was quite amazing. There's another climber there. You can see that one is a climber with lance-shaped leaves. You see it? That's a rainforest plant. That's not a mangrove plant.
So far, this is the only site that we have found that's really a forest. That's a continuous patch of forest of mangrove. From here downriver, you'll find bunches of mangroves, really healthy, some really large, but it's almost like they're individual stands rather than an identifiable marked forest. And so this makes this area unique.
So the question is, how did these mangroves get there?
In life, all of us are connected back in time through common ancestry. So inside the leaves, there is molecules of DNA, and those molecules of DNA carry the genetic history of those plants. So what we need to do was extract that DNA through a series of chemical reactions in the lab. We were able to compare the genetic sequences for different populations and track the genetic history of these plants through time. Each of these points corresponds to one individual, and the first thing that is striking is to see that the Rio San Pedro population is extremely isolated, and that's the first indication that these populations are really different genetically, so it's really different from the rest. So now we estimated the genealogical relationships. And what we see here clearly is that the geographic structure of the Yucatan Peninsula, where we have populations from the Caribbean side, populations from the Gulf side, and populations from Rio San Pedro, more closely related to the populations from Terminus. Rio San Pedro shared a most recent common ancestor with Terminus than with anybody else, suggesting that these two populations are more closely related to each other than Rio San Pedro is to anybody else. Populations from Ria Lagartos and Celestún, they also share a most recent common ancestor than with anybody else. And if we go back in time, Rio San Pedro plus terminus, they share a most recent common ancestor with the common ancestor of Ria Lagartos and Celestun. With time, populations accumulate differences, genetic differences through mutations. So when populations at the genetic level look very similar, it's safe to assume that there hasn't been perhaps enough time for them to differentiate. Using the coalescent theory, which is that genes have to have a common ancestor back in the past, they coalesce into a common ancestor. We asked when that happened.
So we came back here to get the pith sample of the trees. And that pith sample is going to be radiocarbon dated also in the lab when we return. And that data is hopefully going to help us get a better estimate of the generation time of the forest, which is what we need in conjunction with the genetics work that we did the first time. That's going to help to determine when this ecosystem separated from the coast.
Once we found that time, we were able to figure out the time in terms of years of how long ago Terminus and Rio San Pedro share a common ancestor. And that time, so is within the range of the last interglacial.
These guys have been isolated up here for 125,000 years, at least 125,000 years. What happened? What is practically unknown and what makes this finding so exciting is that this is not a relictual ecosystem related to temperature change, but related to a huge change in sea level. And that is new. This is really, in a true sense, a lost world. Something that stayed behind after the last interglacial, and that is telling us a lot about the ability of ecosystems to survive environmental change. We need to look into the past to understand the intensity of change that has taken place on Earth, understand how to deal with the very rapid environmental change that we're suffering during the Anthropocene, and how to save the great flow of evolutionary biodiversity in the surface of the Earth.
A pesar de la agricultura, a pesar de la ganadería, a pesar de los sembradíos de cultivos perennes, a pesar de la tala, ahí están los mangles. Y es triste que actualmente las comunidades, la gente, la presión de la humanidad pueda poner en riesgo este equilibrio que la naturaleza ha generado por miles de años. Creo que es importante ahora convertir al río San Pedro en uno de los verdaderos pulmones del Estado, zona protegida por todas las autoridades, por todos los niveles de las autoridades del país. El río San Pedro es una verdadera joya que debe conservarse.
This orchid, whose scientific name is Myrmecophila, as the name suggests, Myrmex meaning ant, and philos meaning near or attached to, means the orchid that is attached to ants. It has the base of the leaves forms a structure known as a pseudobulb that is hollow, and it has a little hole there where ant colonies live inside those pseudobulbs. And the orchid provides food for the ants in the form of extrafloral nectaries, which are little glands that produce sugary liquid that feed the ants. When the orchid is in flower, the ants are constantly patrolling the flower to prevent nectar robbers from destroying the flowers and to allow the true pollinators to pollinate the orchid. It's a very, very refined and finely tuned system of symbiosis.
El héroe para mí es una persona pues que ha hecho cosas súper difíciles, por ejemplo salvarle la vida a alguien. No me siento una héroe. Me llamo Magali y me dedico hace 14 años a rehabilitar la fauna del Perú. Trabajo también en devolverla a su hábitat natural. Pienso que los animales son más agradecidos que los humanos. Muchas veces me ha pasado de que he apoyado a mucha gente y la he ayudado muchísimo y me han correspondido de una manera que me ha dolido. Entonces prefiero trabajar más con animales que con humanos. No tienen la culpa de todo lo que les hace la gente, porque en realidad que los saquen de su hábitat, que los separen de su familia. La gente piensa que porque son animales no los van a sentir ni lo van a entender, pero yo creo que sí lo sienten y lo entienden también. Habría que educar a la gente para que eso no ocurra nuevamente y para que no tengan animales silvestres como mascotas y que los dejen vivir en su hábitat. Tienen tanto derecho como lo tienen los humanos. Los cuido como si fuesen todos mis hijos. Cuando están felices, yo me siento feliz. Cuando los libero y los veo realizados, reproducidos y mejorados, me siento mucho más feliz. La selva me ha hecho mucho más dura, más guerrera, podría decir. No tengo día libre, no descanso, solo cuando me enfermo nada más. Esto es para gente muy fuerte. No es para todas las personas. Acaba de pasar cuando he ido a monitorear y yo estaba caminando y nunca les había gritado por su nombre, pero en ese momento me sentí tan emocionada de verlos tan cerca que empecé a llamar a una de mis monas con su nombre y bajó hasta 3 metros de altura de donde yo estaba y me quedó mirando. Por dentro me sentí como que qué bien había hecho liberar esos monos y que estaba tanto sacrificio. Eso te da como ganas para seguir liberando, para seguir luchando, para seguir rehabilitándolos. Me gustó muchísimo. Es maravilloso verlos libres y que ellos puedan saltar de un árbol a otro y simplemente no tener un límite. Es lindo, es para lo que yo me he propuesto. O sea, yo quiero que todos se vayan. ¿Qué va a darme paz? Que todos estén bien, que todos se puedan liberar, que todos se puedan lograr. Que todos los que se liberaron estén bien. Y bueno, que los que vengan también se puedan rehabilitar y liberar. Y que tengamos siempre apoyo de la gente, que nunca les falte nada. Eso es lo que me da paz. Gracias. Bueno.